Welcome to
Bean Stuff.
Today we're going to talk about coffee storage and some of the ways to do it and some of the ways to not do it.
Not do it. There's some myths out there, yep.
The way I always think about coffee storage, well, is different now, but I always think of the first thing I always remember is freezing coffee.
Ooh.
But I guess what do we mean by coffee storage?
Well, yeah, some people talk about coffee storage. My usual reaction to coffee storage is, what are you talking about? You don't store coffee. You buy just enough for the week or 2 weeks perhaps, and isn't that good enough?
It was a lean principle of JIT, just in time.
Just in time.
So you only get enough to satisfy the need.
Yes, that's right. And fortunately, where we live, that's not a hard thing to do. There's plenty of roasters around. You can even roast your own coffee, and then you will have just a week's supply, whether you like it or not. Because usually a popcorn popper is so small. It's a good thing to do, but it doesn't produce much. But the good news, you don't start storing coffee.
So can you give us a quick acronym that would help us remember the storage process?
Oh, the storage process. Probably, I remember the acronym KISS.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not the band.
Not the band. No. But we used to say keep it simple, students. Some would say other words, but the KISS. And simply put, to store coffee, if you're going to have to store coffee, and as I said right at the beginning, if you don't have to, don't store coffee in certain ways. I guess we're going to talk about, but buy small enough as you need. Get it a whole bean, so don't get it ground. Whatever you do, don't get it ground. And put it in an airtight, probably a dark jar, or keep it in the packaging it comes in. It's usually dark, and the packaging is quite good because it has a one-way valve. And that's a good feature. In fact, if anything from today, you're looking for coffee to buy, check it has a one-way valve. Check it's a dark bag, and you are in. That one-way valve, by the way, it keeps CO2 goes out of the valve, but oxygen doesn't come in because oxygen is a real enemy of coffee, makes it stale pretty quickly.
Well, and as well as having a one-way valve, having the date on there is helpful on the coffee, because that way you know when the storage was started.
That's really good, Reed. Yeah, I mean, I've seen Best Buy dates before, and I've seen Best Buy dates, 5-6 years later. It's like, you got to be kidding. So that's the second point. I like what you mentioned. That is a one-way valve, and when it was roasted, when the timer started going, because as soon as the coffee is roasted, you've started the degradation of the coffee. Green coffee is fine because it would last 8-9 months, whatever. But once you roast it, you've started the timer, and the coffee is going to start to stale.
It's like driving a new car off the lot. It starts losing value.
Yeah, that's true. Good point.
Just so anybody listening is wondering, if they're wondering, I am sipping a cup of coffee. It's a decaf. What is this, Dad? Is this a decaf?
That would be the Honduras. Or did we have that last week? I can't remember.
I think we may have mentioned it, but it's a very good decaf.
That's good news. We just got 10 bags of that in just today.
Oh, mate.
So you'll be fine.
You'll be fine. So can we kind of look at one first thing, I guess, is in the process of storage, what is the goal, or what are we trying to remove the coffee from? What are we trying to stop it from? I guess what are the enemies of coffee in quote unquote storage? Obviously we're trying to get the right amount for the right time, but what are the enemies of coffee as far as what speeds up that process?
It's an interesting point you make. I don't think people realize that coffee does have enemies. Unlike wine, that is better with age, coffee, as I said, degrades, and it's got probably four enemies I can think of top of my head: moisture, air, heat, and light. Those are probably the four major players that are going to have not good effect on the coffee.
When you say air, so not only do you want to, so heat, air, light, moisture, I think putting it in a cupboard, like a pantry or something, is probably a good spot.
Yes.
But air.
Well,
air is everywhere. How do we get rid of that?
Well, how do you get rid of air?
I might be jumping ahead, but I'm curious myself.
I mean, there's different ways you can get rid of air, and because air is hopefully a lot of oxygen, because that's how we survive. And coffee sucks
Is
up.
that how we do it?
Yeah, sorry. It's called breathing. Keep breathing.
Oh, good.
Don't stop. But air, because there's lots of oxygen, that continues the chemical reaction once the coffee's been roasted, and once again you get degradation and staling of the coffee by that air, just that itself.
Interesting.
What's worse, you take, I said whole beans, which I meant whole beans rather than grinding. If you grind your coffee, you've increased the surface area, and the air now has many more paths to get into the coffee to stale the coffee. So another thing, don't grind the coffee until you need to.
Well, and it reminds me of when we were we didn't go to middle school at the same time.
Oh, right.
But in middle school, for me, when we had a test where we had an Alka-Seltzer pill, like the ones you dissolve in water.
Okay, yes.
And we did a test between does it dissolve faster if it's solid or if you grind it up and put it in. And obviously, if you ground it up, it dissolves faster because more of the water can attack more of the pill.
Yeah.
And it's the same with coffee. It's the more broken apart it is, the quicker the air has the opportunity to rob it of its nutrients and goodness.
Yep.
So what about when we started putting it in the freezer?
Freezer.
I'm gonna go do that right now. All your coffee. What do you feel?
What's that?
No, I'm just kidding. No, is it like freeze dried or in a whole bean I put in the freezer?
Freeze dried is different to freezer, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And there are, as technology continues, as they progress into how do you stop this aging process of the coffee once it's roasted. And there are some good stuff happening out there. Some are a little more expensive, like nitrogen flushing.
Wow, is that a thing that common people can do?
No, you need to. I mean, I guess you could buy like the something.
What is nitrogen flushing?
Well, basically, nitrogen is pumped into the bag where there's coffee, being roasted, whole beans. Nitrogen is pumped in so that oxygen gets pushed out.
Wow.
And the nitrogen is a better thing than oxygen, and it's not going to stale the coffee. You got other. I remember another one is little blocks, we used to call them. It's vacuum packed. Now you do it with meat and other things where you suck out the air, which is not a bad thing, and it sort of everything crinkles down to small little size.
I think of those infomercials where you get the bags, you put the duvet in, you stick the vacuum on it.
That's exactly right.
Except
a coffee bag.
Yeah, a little bit smaller than a duvet.
Actually, I remember. When in my day, that was fairly new, and I remember Ellie bringing out their new blocks and talking about vacuum packed, and I was so excited. I thought I'm going to have fresh coffee. Guess what?
Was it ground?
It was actually. Yeah, I probably shouldn't tell you that, but it was ground. But it was vacuum packed, so it would be fine. Well, yeah. But what I did, I remember getting the scissors. I was so excited to get my vacuum pack. I bought it on in the mail, and I thought I got fresh coffee, and I did have fresh coffee. Well, for about 3-4 minutes. What happened is I took the scissors, opened it up. I'm waiting for the smell to come up, but more than the smell came up, suddenly all the coffee went whoosh, all over my face. The vacuum broke the seal, and the coffee just went whoosh. And of course, as soon as you break the seal of a vacuum, then guess what? You've started the staling process again.
Right. So does that stop so if I vacuum pack it, does that actually stop the staling process until it's open again?
Yes, basically, probably true. I mean, there's a little problem there.
But at the same time, if that coffee sits there for 2 to 4 weeks, it's not going to last 2 to 4 weeks.
I mean, it will do better, no doubt. The problem is when you open it, it's gonna, especially if it's ground, it's gonna degrade quickly, very quickly, like 2 hours. Once you grind coffee, you've got about 2 hours, and then you'll realize that the flavor has changed.
So vacuum sealing, it does help.
It does help, yeah.
But it's not the cure.
The trick there is you open up the vacuum seal and use it. Trouble is, you're not going to use a whole block, a whole pound, whatever, of coffee.
Right.
So a little tricky. Once again, what you first thought is, I need to have my coffee, and I'll store the rest of it. Oops.
So what happens? So what happens if I want to save coffee? What happens if I go to Costco?
Yes.
And I think that, what happened? Well, let's say I'm buying coffee at Costco.
Yeah.
I haven't converted yet.
Bulky sort of stuff.
Yeah, I buy bulk coffee. I've got a big family coming in a couple weeks.
A couple weeks, yeah.
And I want to just get it done, store it in the freezer.
Yeah, and even though I say, store it, I don't know what you're talking about. That shouldn't be in your vocab. But freezing, you can do it. And freezing coffee is way better than fridge. We can talk about fridge. A lot of people would put it in the fridge, and that is the worst thing. It's a no-no when it comes to coffee. I probably should mention the fridge because it's got so much humidity. It's not freezing like you're talking about the freezer. It's just
the moisture.
The moisture, and it just attracts every smell. So you put the coffee next to the carrots, you're going to have a carrot flavored coffee.
Well, and I think when I lived out on my own for a while,
yes,
in one of the places, I remember we would grind coffee and put it in open containers in the fridge because our fridge stunk.
Oh yes.
And so then the ground coffee in just an open, no lid or whatever.
Yep.
It would act like, if you were putting baking soda in the fridge, it would get rid of that.
It's actually a really good thing to do that. Use ground coffee that way.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't drink it. But
no,
I wouldn't suck up bad stuff in the fridge, bad odors.
So there's a good top tip. If you have a stinky fridge and you have old coffee that you've been storing,
yes,
grind it up and use it as a fridge deodorizer.
Yeah.
So so we know kind of how to keep it safe. We want to keep it from moisture, air, all those aspects. What's the we talked about in the pantry as a vacuum sealed container. What's the best container? Is there like I think of like the little glass jars with the lid that clips over kind of thing.
Oh right, which is sort of good. I mean, it's glass, so you can get light, which I see one of the things coffee doesn't like so much. Because if you open it, once again, oxygen is just there. You seal it, it doesn't suck out any oxygen, so it's still got oxygen in the jar that you've just sealed, and the coffee says, yeah, great, let's have a party.
Right.
And it stales again. Freezing coffee, if you're going to do something, I would just keep it in the bag it comes in. And I would put it in another bag, but I'm a bit of a nerd. And I would even proportion out into different bags, so you've
so that way you open only one bag
little bag, and then use the next bag, because as soon as you open the bag, it's exposed again to oxygen, and it's gonna go bad on you. Freezer. The good thing about freezer, it slows. I mean, if you want a little more it's chemistry, but it slows down the molecules. The science, yeah, it slows down the molecules to preserve the flavor. But unfortunately, you get H2 water attached to those molecules, and that forms ice. And then from that, it would take it out of the freezer. It melts, and voila, you've got these bad flavors again from the moisture, from the ice, from the becoming water.
And can a freezer dry coffee out as well, or like give it like a freezer burn kind of smell?
Yeah, it could do. Yes, it could, because coffee is very porous and it is going to get sucked out. And part of that sucking is the sucking of flavors out of the coffee as well. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but freezing, if you're going to do it, you've got a big group coming, like you said, freeze it for sure, put it in, wrap it up tight, make sure it's got some layers so it's not going to do anything bad in there, and bring it out and use it, and then grind it once it's out. Don't put it in ground.
Well, and a better solution is to buy coffee when your friends get here and your family.
Oh, that's a brilliant idea.
Right.
Yeah. Or it's quite exciting to say, your friends come, why not just get some green beans that are not going to go stale as quickly, and they take ages, as I said, 8-9 months or whatever, and get a little popcorn popper, and put your green beans in there. 6-7 minutes later, you've got roasted coffee.
Well, and not to jump ahead of us a distance, but that does tie into our next week's episode.
Yes.
Which is going to be on home roasting.
Oh, okay.
We actually have a special guest coming in.
Do we?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Good, good friend of ours, Tim Almquist.
Oh, wonderful.
Is going to come in and share some of his tips of home roasting, and then we'll have you as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that'd be great. Home roasting is a wonderful thing. It's cheap. You can get fresh coffee, which is what we're talking about. But I'm just saying that freshness of coffee is the wonderful about roasting your own coffee. You can do enough just for that week.
So if you're an overachiever and you want the freshest coffee possible for your guests, make sure you check out next week for the for the home roasting. But this week we don't have home roasting yet. So
no, sorry. Yes, I'm getting ahead of myself there.
Yeah, so when so the freezer's drying it out, it's also putting moisture on it as far as like ice, those kind of things.
Yes.
And those kind of go back to some of our enemies of oxygen, water.
Yeah. Air and
so it does keep it dark and cool.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah,
but it's not the complete picture.
No, and the freezer compared to the fridge, at least the freezer is freezing it, slowing down the molecule rather than just not really slowing it down. The molecules are still going around because the refrigerator is not getting as cold.
Gotcha. And so talk to me. I know I try this occasionally. I'm going to say something. I want to see what it musters up in you.
Oh, yes.
Ceramic.
Yeah, there's a lot of places, a lot of things you can buy to store your coffee in. I don't know why you'd want to store coffee, but anyway, I keep saying that.
If you were doing such a crazy thing.
Ceramic, funny enough, is probably, if you're going to do that, is not a bad place to go. It's not porous. You shut it down and close the lid, I should say. You seal it, and it's going to stay what it is. If you get some other containers, like a plastic one, porous, suddenly it's going to get through the plastic, and you're going to get a little taint. I used to have metal ones, have nicely seals, and you put it down, and the trouble is then you get a metallic taste.
Well, let me challenge you, though.
Okay.
Let me challenge you, though, because I remember seeing, and I think you might still have them.
I might, too. I think
they are 2 plastic canisters.
Yeah, I was quite excited about those.
I know, you're very excited about those. But they're like a plastic canister it's like a tube.
Yes.
And the top has a lid.
Oh, what an invention.
Very inventive.
Yes.
But you can't just put the lid on. If you try, it won't go on. There's a little button on the side.
That's right.
You hold that and you press the lid down, and it allows air to escape as you're pushing the lid on.
Right.
So what about that one?
Well, I mean,
is that plastic and porous too?
I mean, it is still plastic, so it's still got the properties of plastic, and that is going to do a little bit of exchange of the gases there. But that's better. It's getting better because you push, and what you've done that as it goes down, it sounds like it's sealed, and it has in some ways. And you've got rid of more oxygen than if you just didn't have that little seal, that little push vacuum that goes. It's sort of like the vacuum pack again. So, but as soon as you open it, guess what? The lid's open, the coffee's exposed to air, and it starts its process again.
Gotcha.
Coffee's very needy of air and other things. It wants it. May not be good for it, but it wants it.
So can you give us a rundown of just from worst to the best, in your opinion, of different storage methods? So
right.
And so let's say we're buying coffee. We bought enough for the week. We're storing it just for that week. What are the best containers for us to put that in for a week as whole bean coffee?
Right.
Worst one being?
Oh, the worst one probably, it's a toss-up between plastic and metal.
Okay, so plastic and metal.
Perhaps a glass jar. I don't know if...
Well, and all of these are also, like, I'm thinking of, like, the glass jars that have the lid that is already kind of attached.
Yes.
And it flips over, has a little rubber seal.
Little rubber seal, yes.
So that you're not getting more air in.
No, but the trouble with glass, of course, then you've got light, the other enemy that comes in. You put it in a dark cupboard, not a problem again.
Gotcha.
Trouble is, you don't have all your coffee stuff up in the cupboard. You've got to take the glass jar out of the cupboard and you look at it. And the reason you can see it is because light is there. And suddenly you've got light.
So you can get dark glass. It'd be better.
Yeah, good idea.
Kind of like wine being stored in a dark or a green bottle.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
I don't know the science.
No, I'm not sure of that either. It's probably similar.
So
yes.
Plastic or metal, and then you kind of step up to glass?
Yes, I suppose. And then to ceramic. But the top of it all, that would be, you've bought it in a little packet from your roaster, and that's probably, keep it in that. Usually they have a little, like a tin tie, I'm not sure what you call it. Wire tie. That you take out what you need, you push it down, and here's a little tip here, that with the one-way seal in it, and you wind it down again, and you just push it, it's like pushing down a air mattress,
right?
And that just releases the air, so there's less in there again. It doesn't look so good in the cupboard. It looks like a squashed mess, but yeah, it's fine.
Well, and I think so I know for you, like the coffee you've brought home from work has a one-way valve in it, which is really nice, and that little kind of tire piece at the top. And you take out what you need, you push it in, or you scroll down the top and then pinch it so it's secure.
Yep.
And then you can squeeze the air out.
Yes, yeah.
So that's another thing to look for, is look for a bag with a one-way valve.
Yep, I think that's a good thing. And
if someone sells it in a paper bag, maybe if they're doing a more small batch kind of thing.
Yeah, and you're going to use it quickly.
Yeah, they may not have that. But if you do have a one-way valve, number one, you can smell the coffee.
Exactly.
So you can actually push air while you're at the store or wherever you are.
I always wonder how many people have done that. So
you look at the bag that's got no air left in it.
It's probably good it's got no air, but it may not have any flavor left either. I don't know.
And so looking for that is a helpful way, because then that way you don't have to worry about too much of what process you are using it. You can leave it in its bag as long as you seal it up. So just to touch on real quick, so I guess we're looking at plastic and metallic are the worst, going up to glass, then ceramic. Then if you have a package that has a one-way valve, that can actually be a really good way to do it. And then that way you're also not combining it. You're not putting a bulk amount of coffee somewhere.
That's good. Yeah.
Don't freeze it.
No, and well, if you have to, but no, probably not. Just buy enough for your needs for that week or 2 weeks. Coffee in a bag like you're talking about, it's going to last at least a month. It's not if it's whole bean in a dark bag and one-way valve.
Whole bean and all that, but also roasted recently.
Well, that's the other. You mentioned that of the when was this coffee roasted? That date's on there. Okay, I've got 4 weeks. I've got 6 weeks. Whatever
from its inception into the world, then you have about 4 weeks.
Yeah, 4 or 6 weeks depends. Okay, depends how many times you open it and
I think of it like Coca-Cola. Like we don't freeze Coca-Cola to preserve it.
Oh, right.
But left, if we open it once or if we leave it in the counter and it gets warm, there are those conditions that are going to depreciate the actual value of the coffee as far as the flavor.
Yes. Did I mention, that reminds me, I sometimes tell people treat coffee like bread. And you don't come home with a lovely fresh loaf of bread. You don't grind it, for instance. You don't cut it up in little pieces. You don't leave it out on the bench. You don't put it in the fridge just on a plate with this bread because it goes hard. It goes stale very quickly. Coffee will do exactly the same as you grind coffee. If you leave it out, it's going to go like that hard bread. And you will notice, if you do this tips that we're talking about here, you will notice your coffee tastes suddenly different. And you haven't bought anything. All you've done is bought it at the right time, the right amount. No big equipment, and you've got wonderful tasting coffee.
Well, and so even quote air quotes bad coffee, you may notice an improvement, or a change, just by practicing better buying methods.
Yeah, that's right.
So, if something, heaven forbid that we find something that doesn't have a roast date on it.
Oh dear.
But if we
such
do,
a thing?
there are some places out there. It is.
There's a lot of places.
But so let's say we get to the store. Hopefully we find a roast date. I think this will be helpful if you do as well. But if you don't, and they do have a one-way valve.
Yes.
What are the smells that you're looking for? What can you expect from a fresh coffee?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah.
Is it like a burst of flavor, or is it scents, or
coffee has?
If we had to guess, we had to look at it and say, "Is this fresh?"
I often go down in the supermarket. You go past, and I go the coffee aisle. What I smell is not coffee. French vanilla, hazelnut. Those are all flavors that are being put into the coffee.
Right.
They're not natural flavors. If you get fresh coffee, you're gonna suddenly the world is gonna open up to you, and you will, if you push the bag and smell that one little flavor pops out, you're either gonna get a flowery note, you're gonna get a crisp apple, an apricot, and all those words you think people are nerdy and how can they smell that? You're gonna surprise yourself by fresh coffee that comes out and you smell it and you roast it and all that, and you're going to say, wow, this one here, this Ethiopia smells so different to this Brazil. It's got a peanut note. Ethiopia, whoa, it's got a berry note. Those are two very different smells.
Right, and I think that that's a extremely good point. There is nothing that's going to be identical.
No, the coffees are unique. You don't need to do the hazelnuts and all that. You'll suddenly realize, I can get this natural.
Well, and that's the other thing is I think, here in Portland, there's a lot of craft beer and all those kind of things.
Yes.
And a lot of times when you have those kind of things, you can go to that brewery or wherever they manufacture that or distill it or whatever. You can go directly to the source or somewhere very close to that. And I think that, if you find a coffee shop that you like their coffee, ask them what coffee they're using, and then see if it's possible to go to that roastery. Yeah, it seems like recently there's a lot of, which is cool. There's a lot of local roasters that are getting promoted at coffee shops and stuff. It's not always. If you're in Portland, there's a lot of coffee roasters.
That's right.
But look for somewhere local, and maybe drive out of your way to go try something and support a local coffee roaster to try that. But that's a good way to. Let's say you've been buying coffee at like Fred Meyer for us over at the West Coast here, but if you've been buying it at just a grocery store, try going directly to the source.
Yeah.
When you think about like a bakery and bread,
exactly,
it's always better than this.
go to the bakery.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Go to the winery. Go to the sources. They actually know what they're doing usually, and you're going to get a much better product, and you're going to be so happy.
And you couldn't, you're gonna enjoy it because just even smelling the differences you walk in and ask them some of the stuff we've talked about. Ask them if they have one-way valves. When was their roast date? If there is no roast date, ask them why.
Yeah, good question. Good question.
Because if we want to educate everybody, it's maybe they just don't do it because they don't think people care.
I do warn you though. You go down this path, and some of the other things we talk about French presses and so forth. I often think I'm ruining people in a really good way.
Right.
Because once you smell fresh coffee, to go back to stale coffee, I don't know why you'd want to even do that.
I remember for me, like when I first started working.
Yes.
And realized there was free coffee at work. I thought, this is fantastic. Having grown up with, good coffee for my entire life. And I remember drinking coffee and going, what is this? This is not coffee. And it doesn't surprise me why people say they don't like coffee.
Yeah, that's a good. Often people come to the roastery and have a cupping, and one person says, "Oh, I don't like coffee. I've never liked coffee." And we'll do what we've been talking about. We do a cupping, which is another episode, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But if they get to smell the coffee, the reaction on their face is quite miraculous. They go, "This is not coffee." I say, "That is coffee.
Right.
You've just never smelled coffee before. What you've smelled is stale, and I wouldn't go near it either. I would just say I'm not drinking coffee, because guess what? You haven't been drinking coffee. You've been drinking just dried up the shell of the bean.
Probably haven't been storing it right.
Oh, there's lots of reasons,
amongst other things. But I guess we're kind of getting off topic a little bit. It was some good stuff, but so to kind of wrap up today's episode, the idea, best thing you can do is to buy enough coffee for what you need. That doesn't mean buy coffee for just that one drink or that one day. Buy it for the next 2 weeks or the next week, but don't buy more than you need. Once you start needing to figure out how to store these things in like freezers and all sorts of stuff, you've got too much.
You're getting on a slippery slope when you start doing that.
Right. It's time to readdress that.
And Reed, we are so fortunate here in the Northwest and other places that we can go to the roast. We can stop by every week. We can stop by every day if we wanted to, and we can buy just enough for the next part of time that we're going to need.
Well, and I guess that's a good thing to point out too. If you really don't have anything close by, always feel free to go online and order coffee. If you really want to, call them as well and just ask, because let's say it takes 4 days to get shipped to you. As long as they roast it appropriately, you're gonna have time.
Yep.
And you can ask how they bag it and that kind of thing, so we're not gonna get scents from.
That's good news here, Reed.
Yeah.
As you talk to these roasters and as you actually take that step and say, the good news is roasters love talking about coffee, and they will be so excited because there's so many people drinking this sludgy stuff that's so horrible, and they will agree with you. But you start just asking some simple questions, you will get them so excited.
Yeah. So buy what you need.
Yep.
Store it if you have to.
Yes.
And if you do store it, make sure it's away from heat, air, oxygen, and moisture. And worst case, plastic or metal.
Yeah.
Better is glass. Keep it in a dark
ceramic.
Ceramic is going to be the best. And enjoy your coffee. I think that's the end all be all. Is you can actually improve whatever coffee you currently have just by making sure you're appropriately storing it or not storing it.
I don't. So we're finishing up here, but I remember going to Roasters Guild in Skamania Lodge, and we had all these air pots of coffee that they ground, and at different times. One they ground immediately, and we had it there. We were drinking it within like 2 minutes, sort of thing. Had another one they didn't grind. They ground it, but they left it open for a while, and it was 2 hours. And they ground another one, left that one for 2 days. I think that we did 4 days. It's as long as the conference was, and you could tell from the 2 minute one to the 2 hour one, there was a complete difference. It suddenly staled in that time, and obviously after 2 hours, 2 days, 4 days, it wasn't coffee anymore. It was just some strange thing, but not as good as the 2 minute one.
So it's very important.
Yeah.
I also want to give a shout out to my coworker Chris, who got us a new microphone to try out.
Yes, thank you,
so
Chris.
Hopefully the audio sounds better for you. Also, as always, check us out on Twitter, Facebook, all those places, beanstuff.com. And if you have any ideas of what you want us to talk about, that's always, we love that as well. We love always coming up with new ideas. But so tune in next week, and we're going to talk with Tim Almquist, and we're all going to kind of have a fireside chat about doing home roasting and what that looks like for Tim, and what other ways we can do that as well.
Did you know you can even home roast while you're on a camping on a fire?
Yes.
Okay, just
I know it's
not saying anything. Not saying anything.
Well, I think we mentioned it.
Yeah, we might have. Yeah.
You even home roast while you listen to the podcast.
Well, there you go.
Maybe not. Maybe wait for the other podcast to come out first.
Yeah, true. Good point.
Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
The podcast you just heard was recorded with Anchor. If you want to make your own, download the Android or iOS app completely free from anchor.fm/podcast. That's anchor.fm/podcast.